Welcome to IB Online. I'm MJ, your instructor for A-level Sociology. Our lesson for today is the process of learning and socialization. This particular topic is also referred to as the socialization topic. Now, before we proceed, I'd want you all to have a look at the syllabus so that you have an idea as to where we stand when we're doing this. Before this lesson, we have now, we're talking about paper one over here, right? Before this lesson, we had covered this topic that said culture, roles, norms, values, beliefs, customs, ideology, power, and status as elements in the social construction of reality. Today, the topic that you see highlighted over here, that is the importance of socialization in influencing human behavior, including the nature versus nurture debate. This is the topic that we are to begin today. Now, before we get started, what is the significance of this particular topic? How often do we get questions on this topic? Is it an important topic? Is it something that would help us score good in our examination? Is it something, does it comprise of something that would help us understand ourselves, understand our role within the society better? Now, about this particular topic, yes, this is the answer to the first question. Yes, this has been a question that we have been tested on by the Cambridge pretty often. I just show you a couple of questions that we've had on this. Now, this question that you all see in front of you is a 26 mark evaluative essay question. This is a 26 mark evaluative essay question that you usually come across in paper one. Paper one comprises of two sections. We have section A and we have section B. Section B allows us to attempt one question out of two. So we have choice in section B. We get two questions, that is question number 4 and question number 5. Out of these two questions, we're expected to attempt any one. Now, let's have a look at this question. Let's see how it reads like. If you have a look at this question, the question reads, evaluate the view that human behavior is shaped entirely by the process of socialization. We are to evaluate this view. Now, this 26 mark questions that we get, also referred to as evaluative essays. These are questions where we expected to where we're expected to provide content in support of the statement and against the statement. When I talk about, or when I use the word statement, I'm actually referring to the highlighted part over here. If you have a look at the highlighted part or the highlighted view or the highlighted statement, it reads, human behavior is shaped entirely by the process of socialization. Allow yourself a couple of seconds so that you understand what this topic is all about. We're talking about human behavior, us as humans. Is it true that our human behavior, or is it true that our behavior is shaped entirely by the process of socialization? For this, it is pretty essential that we understand what socialization is, and that is what exactly this topic is about. Now, socialization, if I put it in a simplistic manner, socialization is a learning process that changes humans into social beings, or a learning process that changes human beings into social beings. Now, the way we, us as individuals, the way we walk, talk, eat, sit, you do realize at some point or the other we have been taught all of this, and all of this has, or all of this does come under the process of socialization. So what is socialization again? Socialization in its most simplistic and basic form, it is a learning process that changes us human beings into social beings. We'd be discussing this in detail ahead in the next few lessons, but to give you a basic little idea, if you've watched the movie Jungle Book, you'd see how it is like for us humans to be, so how important it is for us humans to be socialized, right? How important it is for us humans to be socialized, because if you do not go through, or if you do not encounter the socialization process, you might end up being like the character in the movie Jungle Book. So human behavior is shaped entirely by the process of socialization. Socialization is a learning process that makes us who we are, right? Now, again, you see, if so, for this particular answer, you are to write down in support of this particular argument, and you are to write down against this particular argument as well. Of course, when it comes to being able to attempt a question on this. I don't expect you to be able to attempt a question on this particular topic right away, but nonetheless, this should be a good starting point, so that before we even get started with the topic, you should have an idea about the type of questions that we've had on this. Now, moving on to the second question. The second question over here reads, before that, this is from October, November 2021. The question over here reads, evaluate the view that nurture is more important than nature in shaping human behavior. Nurture is more important than nature. Now, when we use the word nature, we are referring to the things that we are born with, right? The things that we born with, nature, the things that are pre-programmed, that are a part of us, our personality. However, when we use the word nurture, we're talking about socialization, the socialization process. So the term socialization is often used interchangeably with the term nurture. So again, evaluate the view that nurture, that is socialization, is more important than nature in shaping human behavior. The same topic, almost the same content. Yes, there's a difference in terms of how the examiner has phrased this. Another question that I'd want you all to have a look at. This question is from February, March 2022, and the question over here reads, evaluate the view that socialization is the most significant factor in shaping human behavior. You see how the same topic has been questioned, has been tested again and again. The fourth question that we have over here is from section A. Section A for A-level sociology comprised of 3 questions. Question number 1, question number 2, question number 3. There is no choice when it comes to section A. Section A is of 34 marks, right? Section A is of 34 marks and section B is of 26 marks. Having a look at this question, the question over here reads, okay, now for this particular question, that is question number 3. As we speak about question number 3 in paper 1 and paper 2 both, because the paper structure remains to be the same. If you talk about question number three comprises of a statement. So when you talk about question number three has a statement like this. This is a statement that I'm referring to. I'll just highlight this in yellow. So question number 3 comprises of a statement, and the statement over here says socialization controls the way people behave, right? Right after this statement, you get a 10-mark question where you are expected to explain this view, or in other words, where you're expected to write down in support of this particular view, right? Again, question number 3 is divided into two parts. You have 3A and 3B, where 3A is a 10-mark question, 3B is a 6-mark question. Question number 3A gives you a statement. Right after the statement, the question reads, explain this view, where you're expected to write down in support of this particular argument. However, question number 3B asks you, this is a continuation of the same question. This is a statement again, socialization controls the way people behave. Over here in this particular question, that is of 6 marks, you are expected to give one sociological argument against the view. One sociological argument against the view. So it's pretty much the same as we were doing or dealing with the 26-mark question. For a 26-mark question, we're expected to write down around 3 to 4 points in support of the view and 3 to 4 points against this view. However, for this particular question, that is question number 3, like I said, you get a statement. 3A asks you to explain the statement, or in other words, you're expected to write down in support of the statement. However, 3B asks you to give one sociological argument against that particular statement. Taking this ahead, we have had another question in May, June 2023, which again was question number 3. We have a statement over here. The statement reads, socialization is a one-way process like it happened earlier. It's a 10-mark question. You're expected to explain this view, or you're expected to write down in support of this view. This would always be followed by a 6-mark question from the same statement. Here, I'll highlight this again, taking you to this 6-mark question where you're expected to give one sociological argument against it. Now, this particular topic Socialization. Socialization, like I said, is a learning process that changes a human being into a social being, a learning process that changes a human being into a social being. I'm referring to this as topic 1.1 because if I show you the syllabus, this is what exactly what we are what we are to be doing today. Now, taking this a step further, as we speak about this particular topic. Initially, let's talk about the nature side of the debate, and then we'd move on and talk about the nurture side of the debate. So, this question essentially is about the nature versus nurture debate. Let me write this down over here so that you have a thorough understanding. This is about the nature versus nurture debate. If you remember, there was a question along these lines as well. Now, the nature versus nurture debate. As I use the word nature over here, I'm referring to things that are natural, things that we are predisposed with or predisposed to, things that we have in us by default. However, when we speak about nurture, nurture has to do with the things that are learned, learned from the people around us, learned from the environment around us, things that, again, we get to learn through the socialization process. So ask yourself a question. The way you are, the way you behave, the way you act, the way you interact, the way you react, do you think it has to do with something that is natural, that or in other words, do you think it has got to do with something that you're born with, or does it have something to do with the environment around you, the people around you? So when and if we get a 26-mark question on this, this is how we are expected to deal with this. For now, I'd want to start this discussion with the nature side of the debate. So this is what we are, or what we would be focusing on right now. Now, as we speak about the nature side of the debate, initially, like I said, I'd talk about argument, or I'd talk about a couple of points. In this lesson specifically, we talk about a couple of points in support of the idea of nature, or the view that human beings behave the way they do because they are naturally predisposed to it, because they are genetically predisposed to it, because they have probably inherited it, right? So the nature side of the debate in human behavior within a sociological context emphasizes on the role of genes. You might as well write it down. I just write down a bit so that you might as well be taking notes. Nature side of the debate focuses on the role that genes play. It focuses on the role that biology plays. It focuses on the role that evolutionary factors play in shaping individuals' actions, or the idea that genes, the idea that biology, the idea that evolutionary factors have an important role to play when it comes to us being the way we are, us acting the way we do act. Another factor that I'd like to add up to this could be things that are innate, or things that we're born with, right? Things that we inherit. Now, in support of the nature side of the debate, we could discuss a couple of factors. To begin with, we could speak about number one, we could speak about genetic influence. Number two, we could speak about evolutionary psychology. Number three, in support of the nature side of the debate, we could discuss biological determinism. I'll explain you all of these in a bit. We could speak about innate behavior, or reflexive action, the way we are reflexes, number four. Number five, we could also speak about the extent to which individuals who support the nurture side of the debate, the extent to which they ignore the fact that human behavior is limited by biological factors, human limitations due to biological factors. Number six, we could talk about how there are still, regardless, I mean, if you talk about cross-cultural comparison, if I talk about comparison between individuals from different societies, you'd still see there are certain basic traits that, right? There are certain basic traits, or there are certain, I think, writing basic traits are to be found in humans across the globe, such as showing emotions, fearing something, right? That's a basic trait. Number seven, we could also talk about medical conditions. We could also talk about psychological conditions. Now, there are etc etc. I mean, there's a lot more that could be brought in or discussed when it comes to the role that nature plays in terms of determining human behavior too. Now let's discuss these points one at a time. Let's talk about genetic factors first in support of the nature side of the debate. As we speak about the role that is played by genes, as we refer to the role that is played by genes, proponents of the nature side of the debate, they believe that genes play a very significant role in determining personality traits. Now, genes determine personality. I'm not saying only genes determine personality. Nonetheless, I'm sure you would agree to this. At times, you tend to be, at times you tend to be doing things that your parents do. At times, you get to hear from people that, hey, you do this just like your dad does. Hey, you do this just like your mom does. So genes play a significant role in determining personality traits. Genes also affect our level of intelligence. The concept of innate intelligence or inborn intelligence. Yes, there are people who believe that our intelligence, our level of intelligence is inherited too. And genes also define our social behavior. Now, there have been certain researches conducted on this, and especially there have been researches that have been conducted on twins. uh for instance, uh if you I don't know if you've ever come across this, I'm forgetting the name of the documentary, Three Identical Strangers. So this is an amazing documentary. If you watch this, Three Identical Strangers, currently I believe it is available on Netflix as well. If not, YouTube would definitely have it. So if you watch this particular documentary, you'd see how different individuals, three young brothers, I mean three boys who were separated at the time of birth, despite of them being brought up in very different environments, they tended to have a lot of similarities amongst them. Now, this could again be used as an example to support the nature side of the debate. So, twins and adoption studies have shown that certain behaviors and traits such as aggression, right? That's a behavioral trait. Risk taking, that's again a behavioral trait, a personality trait. And there are certain social tendencies that could be highly heritable. So one point that I believe you have understood as to how nature plays an important role in terms of shaping human behavior. Number two, we could speak about evolutionary psychology. Now, the word evolutionary explains it pretty much all. The idea that human behaviors can be understood through the lens of evolution. Darwin's theory of evolution, the idea behind the survival of the fittest, right? Okay, now all of what I'm discussing right now, I'm trying to give you a basic idea on what this entire nature versus nurture debate is. Of course, we'd be covering it more from the we'd be covering it more from the course book as well. But this is just, I believe, this is something that I think should be used as a prerequisite to help a student understand as to what we're actually stepping into. So, evolutionary psychologists, they believe that human behavior can be understood through the lens of evolution. There are certain traits and certain human behaviors that are advantageous. Right? There are certain traits that work in the best of that work in our favor, and us as evolutionary psychologists believe that the traits that us as humans we think would benefit us as humans we think would be important for our survival, we end up adapting to them, right? We end up adapting to them. An example that might help you understand this at this point. Now, the generation that I belong to, we did not, while we were studying, while we were uh, of your age, while I was of your age, we did not even ever think of, at least I could speak about myself, I never thought of ever being able to complete my A levels in this manner, through this digitalized manner. But then again, us as humans, there are many people who believe that us as humans, we tend to have this innate ability to adapt to things. We tend to adapt to things that we think would work in our favor. We tend to adapt to things that we think are essential for our survival. So traits and behaviors that were advantages for survival as well as reproduction in our ancestral environment may still influence our actions today. For example, us as humans, we have a tendency to form social bonds, right? Because we know, us as humans, we cannot survive in isolation. Us humans, we are also known as social animals, right? So the tendency to form social bonds and to cooperate within groups can be seen as an evolutionary adaptation. Now, I've said a lot. I mean, evolutionary psychology, we could, if we are to take notes on this, we could say adopting traits that help with survival. Example, forming social bonds. And at the same time, we could, like, reproduction mechanisms. Without reproduction, the society would cease to exist. The third point in line that I'd like to bring in under discussion over here is biological determinism. Now, while speaking about biological determinism, we tend to focus on certain biological factors. For instance, we could talk about our brain structure. Don't you see biology being involved over here? We could speak about neurochemistry. We could speak about the role that hormones play, or let's just say hormonal level. They play a very crucial role when it comes to shaping human behavior, our brain structure. For the ones who have psychology as a subject, you'd study how biology plays, or how our brain structure plays an important role when it comes to determining our behavior. The ones who have interest in neurochemistry, you would, I'm sure, be able to relate to this better. We know the extent to which our hormones, or the levels of hormones we have, they play the role in terms of shaping our behavior, right? Number four, we could speak about innate behavior, innate behavior and reflexes. There are certain behaviors that are considered to be innate, that are considered to be found in humans across the globe. For instance, we have certain reflex actions. I mean, if you try, if you, even if you talk about a toddler, right, or an infant, you try moving your finger right close to the child's eye, there would be, you'd experience a certain reflex action, right? Or when it comes to breastfeeding, there are the young kids, you've seen how infants, how they feed, they aren't taught how to feed, they learn, and they learn it. So certain innate behaviors or certain reflex actions could be used as an example over here. For instance, grasping in infants. Or we could speak about how we use our reflexes for safety, like blinking. These aren't things that are taught to us. That doesn't even look like blinking. I'll just rewrite it. Now, taking this ahead, we could speak about how individuals who focus on, or how individuals who support the idea of nature, how individuals who support the idea of nurture, do not get confused with these names. Nature is something that you're born with. Nurture is something that you learn. Socialization is a term that we use interchangeably when it comes to using the word nurture, Nurture. So again, we could write down about the limitations, or the limits rather. I just write down biological limitations. Biological limitations when it comes to human behavior. Now, for instance, if it is, I'll just give you an example. You cannot prepare a toddler to run a marathon, right? I mean, yes, you could, the learning process or the role that environment plays is pretty important. We do agree, but then again, there are certain biological limitations. The muscular development of a young child wouldn't really allow you to train that child to become an athlete, let's just say. Now, moving on, another point that we could use over here. I'll just number this as point number 6. We could speak about uh, similarities, similarities found in humans, beyond cultures, right? Now, for instance, like I had given you guys an example of how emotions, that's a basic emotion such as, let's just say, fear, joy, sadness. They're expressed, all of these emotions, you'd see them being expressed in diverse cultures as well. Who is it? I mean, you don't have to be taught to fear something. You don't have to be taught to experience joy. You aren't really taught how to be sad. So that could be another example. Next, we could speak about medical and psychological conditions. Now, when we speak about these medical and psychological conditions, I'm sure you'd agree there are certain medical conditions that we have. I mean, we're more vulnerable. The likelihood of us having diabetes is more if someone in our family has diabetes. We just more vulnerable, we just more inclined towards, or the chances of us having diabetes increase if someone in our family already has diabetes. Likewise, if we speak about psychological conditions such as there are certain mental illnesses too. If we step a bit into clinical psychology, there are certain mental illnesses such as schizophrenia. Let's talk about another psychological condition that is more popular, depression. Depression, like you genetically inherit medical conditions. Let me repeat. The way you genetically inherit medical conditions, there's a possibility that you might end up inheriting mental conditions too, right? So I hope, I mean, I just write it down for medical conditions. Let's just say diabetes. For mental conditions, we could say, what did I just say? Mood disorders or depression, mood disorders, or OCD or schizophrenia, so on and so forth. Now, this was a bit about the basics on the nature side of the debate. Now, another important thing that I'd like to discuss before we even proceed, when we talk about answering the 26 mark question, as you did see how we have, or how we're expected to write down content both in support of the idea and against the idea. Now, this is the question. We're expected to write down both in support of the idea and in evaluation or against the idea. Now, I've seen many students uh, find it pretty challenging to be able to write down in support of the nature side of the debate. So I just wanted to give you a basic idea on how you could actually write down and develop on the nature side of the debate. So let's begin with the nature side of the debate over here. According to the nature side of the debate, of the argument, biology may influence some of the ways people behave, like I've been discussing. Like all animal species, humans seem to be programmed by the genes to some extent, right? Now, let's understand this. Like all human species, like all animal species, humans seem to be programmed by their genes to some extent. For example, there seem to be drives for procreation when we reproduce, and for self-preservation. Like I was giving an example, us for our survival, you've seen how individuals, they end up becoming defensive. Genetics suggests that behavior may be guided by instincts based on biological intuitions rather than that can be seen as part of human nature. Instincts, what are instincts now? Instincts are fixed human features. There are things we born knowing, and our cultural environment plays little to no role in the development of these instincts. For example, many females, they say, have a mothering instinct. Now, over here, in support of the idea of the nature side of the debate, in support of the idea of the nature side of the debate, we could write down about the role that our genes play. We could write down about the role instinct plays. We could write down about the role biology plays, right? So, developing this idea further, it can be said that people are born with certain capabilities that are then put into practice through environmental experiences. Nature gives us strong hints about behavioral rules, but people are free to ignore those hints. If women have greater childbearing capabilities than men, then it makes genetic sense for them to take on a caring role within a family. However, this is not something their genes force them to do. Now, what we have to understand from this point over here is that based on the assumption that females tend to have a mothering instinct, it does make a lot of sense, right? Listen to what I'm saying carefully over here. When I say based on the assumption that females tend to have mothering instincts, right? If females do have mothering instincts, then it does make a lot of sense for females to be playing the role of a caregiver, for females to be rearing a child too. I'm not using the word bearing with a B. I'm using the word rearing with an R, with a R, right? So, however, yes, according to this idea, according to this assumption, it makes a lot of sense for females to uh, cater to the rearing or the upbringing of a child. But nonetheless, this is not something that is carved in a stone. This is not something that a woman has to do. So, however, this is not something genes force them to do. Now, taking this ahead again in support of the idea of nature side of the debate, biological ideas supporting nature side of the debate. Biological ideas about evolution have sometimes been used to explain social development. That is, instead of socialization. What we understand from this is, see, biological ideas or biology has sometimes been used to explain social development, or the social development, or in this context, the way individuals behave, the way individuals act, react, so on and so forth. These ideas range from relatively simple forms of social Darwinism, based on the idea that social life simply involves the survival of the fittest, to the more sophisticated arguments of social biology. So what we're talking about over here is that the nature side of the debate might include something as simple as social Darwinism, or something as complicated as social biology. Now, as we speak about social Darwinism over here, let me show this to you. So, what is sociobiology? Sociobiology, the systematic study of how natural selection shapes biological basis of human behavior. What is social Darwinism? The idea behind social Darwinism, or I'm sure all of you, or I'd say most of you, would know about Darwin's theory of evolution, right? Darwin believed human beings, they survive, the fittest survives, right? I mean, this idea of social Darwinism led to imperialism. What is imperialism now? How the people in the West were seen in its most simplistic form, of course, in this context, how the people in the West were seen to be a better race, how the whites were considered to be a better race, how the whites were, how people were made to believe that since white people are better, they have all the right to to govern and to control the non-whites. Of course, when there's imperialism, there would of course be racism, right? Or the idea behind eugenics, right? Or the idea behind social inequality, the idea behind genetic engineering too. Now, all of these, they are pretty interesting in their they're all pretty interesting. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to deviate from this. If you have time, you just note these down over here. Once you are done with this lesson, you might as well Google these and then try connecting it with the topic that we are discussing right now. So taking this ahead, we are talking about the nature versus nurture debate. While discussing the nature versus nurture debate, in support of the idea of nature, this is what we'd be discussing. We have spoken about the role genes play. We've spoken about instinct, social Darwinism. Then we'd move on to talk about social selection, bioprogramming, and then we'd speak about psychology, the role that psychology has played. Now we're covering this from the course book, right? I did explain this to you before where we were doing where I was trying to explain this to you by writing it as well. Now this is more in line with the requirements of Cambridge. Now, social Darwinism, based on the idea that social life simply involves the survival of the fittest, to the more sophisticated arguments of social biology. In these, biological principles of natural selection and evolution are applied to human animal to produce what Wilson argued is a biological basis of all human behavior. So this name Wilson, he argued, or he came up with the idea of biological basis of for all human behaviors. He claimed that although human behavior is not genetically determined, it is strongly influenced by biological programming or the idea of biogramming. Now, I'd want you to take a note on this term over here, biogramming. What is biogramming, or what idea did Wilson come up with? According to Wilson, in 1979, us as humans, we have probably been pre-programmed. Us as humans, we've probably been pre-programmed to behave in a particular manner. Us as humans, we've been pre-programmed. Like, for instance, if you're using an iPad, if you're using a computer, you know how programming works for them, right? So this is this device that I have in front of me. I write, hi, this is being programmed to show it on your screen. So likewise, when you speak about us human beings behaving the way we do, there's a possibility that we probably doing so because we have been pre-programmed to do so, right? Now, we spoke about Wilson. Let me take you a little back again. So, do you see Wilson? Research evidence. Likewise, do you see Wilson again? Do you see the concept of social biology, bioprogramming? Read out the question. You might as well pause it here. Evaluate the view that nurture is more important than nature in shaping human behavior. Nurture is more important than nature. For now, we're talking about the nature side of the debate. And of course, this would be an evaluation if considering this particular question. So this is how what we studying would actually be put to use. Likewise, with Wilson, you see this another name, Parsons. Who is Parsons? His name was this prominent American functionalist. We study what functionalism is later, but Parsons was very popular during the 1960s. He belonged to the middle class. He was a faculty member at the Harvard University. He's Parsons. Okay, here you go. You get to see him too. So Wilson believed that these bioprogrammers suggest that humans are likely to behave in a particular way, in particular ways. For example, he believed that men and women are biologically programmed with different traits. Now, understand this, and I'm sure you'd agree feminists have all the reasons to disagree to Wilson and to disagree to Parsons and to not like them too. So according to Wilson's, females are programmed in a particular manner, males are programmed in a different manner. So for example, he believed that men and women are biologically programmed with different traits that lead them to perform different cultural roles. For instance, women are expected to be passive. Women are expected to be playing a nurturing role, to be caring, loving, sharing, which makes them best suited for child rearing. However, male traits of aggression, men are assumed to be more aggressive. Genetically, men are assumed to be biologically or naturally more aggressive. Male traits of aggression best suit them to a providing role that translates into paid work in contemporary societies. So from this slide, we study two things. Number one, we spoke about now, all of this is in support of the nature side of the debate. We initially spoke about the concept of social Darwinism. Number two, we spoke about Wilson, who came up with the idea of biogramming. Third in line, we have a look at what Mr. Parsons has to say about this. Now, the influence of sociobiological ideas on sociology. Parsons in 1959 argued that in most societies, family roles are organized to reflect the belief that women play an expressive role. Now, this gentleman, Parsons, it's better that you learn it right away because this is something that is going to help you a lot ahead too. According to Talcott Parsons, his name was Talcott Parsons. According to him, males are expected to play an instrumental role within the society, or the role of a provider or a breadwinner. However, females are expected to play an expressive role or cater to the more emotional aspects of family relationships. Now, Parsons argued that in most societies, family roles are organized to reflect the belief that women play an expressive role, that of caring for others. Men, however, play an instrumental role with a focus on providing for the family. Both of these roles are based in part on evolutionary biological principles. While males and females can choose not to take these roles, Parsons believed overriding the biogrammer behavior that opposes this biological instinct is seen as a less efficient way of organizing human cultural relationships. So according to Parsons, instrumental roles or the roles of a provider suit men the best. Expressive roles or the role of a caregiver, caretaker, best suit females. According to Parsons again, no one's going to force males to play the instrumental role or females to be playing an expressive role. Nonetheless, Parsons believed that if you are choosing to ignore these roles, if you are choosing to override bioprogramming, this might be a less efficient way of organizing human cultural relationships. Or according to Parsons, for a society to operate in its most optimal, in its best of form, men should be doing this, women should be doing this. So, for example, men can take on the expressive role and women the instrumental role, but this is likely to cause social problems. According to Parsons, if men start playing an expressive role, if women start playing an instrumental role, this is likely to cause social problems. Now, at this point, I'd want you all, despite of the fact that this gentleman was an American, I'd want to reiterate on the fact that he came up with this idea in the early 1960s. So if I talk about 60s, 24, so yeah, that's good about 60, 64 years. So 60, 64 years back. But this is likely to cause social problems because it is not making the best use of the different capabilities of males and females. Now, again, taking it ahead in line and in support of the nature side of the debate. Remember, we just discussing, yes, this lesson has turned out to be longer than I had planned it to be, but I'd want to cover this entire nature side through this particular lesson alone. And the next lesson, we would be discussing the nurture side of the debate, that is socialization, argument or points in support of the socialization theory. So human behavior is explained through natural selection. As per the general principle of natural selection, those people that are evolutionarily successful are selected and reproduced. Now, this picture says it all. Will this giraffe be able to survive? No. Will this giraffe be able to survive? No. Will this giraffe be able to survive? Yes. Right. Now, taking this ahead, of course, in your CIs, you wouldn't be tested on giraffes. This was just to help you understand this better. So, uh, as per the general principle of natural selection, those behaviors that are evolutionarily successful are selected and reproduced. In this way, various forms of social behavior, such as family development and gender roles, can be explained as evolutionary adaptations occurring over many centuries. They represent successful adaptations to problems common to all human societies, such as how to raise children while also providing the things family members need for survival. Likewise, human behavior explained through psychology. Psychology is, however, a more diverse field, and there are many different explanations for human development. These range from those focused on genetics, that is evolutionary psychology, to social psychology. So, psychology is a diverse field. I'm sure everyone, most of you would have an idea about. So, on one extreme, we have evolutionary psychology that has more to do with biology, and on the other extreme, we have social psychology that is more inclined towards the social aspects, and many people believe that is closer to sociology too. So, social psychology takes places greater stress on how environmental factors such as family and work relationships affect the development of genetics or psychological predisposition. Means it all. Now, this term that you see over here, ETAL, you got to learn this right away. This means others and others. So, means was not alone, there were other people that were a part of this theory as well. Although there exists a genetic instinct for babies to become attached to the primary caregiver, this can be affected by environmental factors. The most important of these is the ability of the caregiver to recognize and understand the needs of the child. Now, this is very beautifully written. We tend to believe that females are to be considered wholly, solely responsible for caregiving of a child. Yes, if you speak about biology, a woman is expected to reproduce, a woman is expected to rear, sorry, and a woman is expected to bear a child, be bear with a B, okay? However, this again does not mean just because a woman bears a child or reproduces a child or gives birth to a child, she would be expected to rear the child too, or she would be considered to be wholly, solely responsible for the upbringing of the child as well. According to this theorist, there exists a genetic instinct for babies to become attached to the primary caregiver. This can be affected by environmental factors too. The most important of these is the ability of the caregiver. This is very nicely done. The ability of the caregiver to recognize and understand the needs of the child. So even if it is a male, even if it's a father, could be any other male too, if you are able to recognize and understand the needs of the child, yes, the child might be more attached to you. So, this was a bit that I wanted you all to have an idea about the nature side of the debate, right? The nature side, or the explanations that human beings behave the way they do, probably because of nature. I would like to bring this lesson to an end over here, and see you all in the next lesson, where we would talk about the flip side of the coin, where we talk about the nurture side of the debate, or where we would discuss the significance, the importance socialization plays in terms of shaping human behavior. Thank you.